Is Robert Cruz on behalf of the Abbasi program in Islamic Studies at Stanford. It's a great honor to welcome Keith Ellison and to thank you all for attending this morning. It's an unusual time for us, but our guest has such strong appeal that he has filled the room at this odd hour. I think we could have begun at 6 a.m., and I think the same crowd would have appeared. So it's a true testament to the importance of our speaker and our Islam in America lecture series that he has been able to fill the room at this odd hour. So we're grateful to Congressman Ellison for taking time out of his schedule and for honoring us here with his presence today. The formal introduction will fall to our next speaker, Ms. Tessa Yusuf, who is a sophomore. She is very active in our Abbasi program. She's received an award to pursue an internship in Washington, D.C., her hometown. She's a sophomore international relations major, and I'm going to turn the podium over to her now to formally introduce Congressman Keith Ellison. So Tisa, please welcome. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, there's my phone, sorry. Okay. So thank you all for being here this morning. I know you're all excited for the event today, as I am. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Keith Ellison. We've been looking forward to this event for quite some time now, and so it's really great that it's finally here. Keith Ellison is a congressman representing the 5th District of Minnesota, which is one of the most diverse districts in the state. In 2007, Congressman Ellison was elected as the first Muslim to serve in the United States Congress and the first African American to represent Minnesota. So needless to say, it's very important and exciting to have him here. We, as part of the Abbasi program's Islam in America lecture series, which is bringing artists, intellectuals, and policymakers, this series explores the history, complexity, and diversity of the American Muslim experience. At a time when anti-Muslim sentiment and Islamophobia are on the rise, it is important for the American Muslim community to have an advocate on Capitol Hill. It is a momentous occasion to have Congressman Ellison here today. He was elected co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and is an active member of the Congressional Black Caucus and currently serves on multiple committees in the House. Prior to being elected, he was heavily involved in activism and community organizing on issues pertaining to workers' rights and employment and civil rights. He has been an advocate for marginalized communities throughout his career, including both the Black and Muslim communities, and is someone that we all look up to very greatly. As college students, we feel the amplification of political sentiments across the nation on our campuses where activism and bigotry meet head to head. The media, alongside with politicians, spew negative rhetoric about Muslims, both blatantly and subtly, making many Muslims feel antagonized. For the Muslim community at Stanford, it is inspiring and exciting to have a leader such as Congressman Ellison here today. We are a community that is aiming to improve the perception of Muslims on our campus and in the community at large. Congressman Ellison's engagement in the Muslim community serves as an example. He shows us that this is a time when American Muslims must increase their engagement in politics. We cannot wait until things seem worse to take a stand, and we cannot stay by the wayside while our community is being attacked. We must be more active than ever during this election year especially. And as a college campus, this is the perfect setting to have this conversation. This is where crucial changes, dialogue, and political engagement are occurring. The next generation of Americans, Muslim and non-Muslim, who will impact change in our nation is being formed here and on other college campuses. I know that Congressman Ellison's speech will be informative and motivating and will help us to understand the place of American Muslims in our country and within politics today. Again, thank you all for being here on behalf of the Abbasi program, and thank you to Congressman Ellison for being here with us today. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. How's everyone doing today? Peace to all. I want to say a very special thank you to Stanford University in general, but to Swaib and Sarah Abbasi in particular. You all have been blessed, and you haven't kept your blessings just to yourself. You've shared them with an institution of learning so that you can take the blessings you've received and make sure that they're distributed to a very wide range of people. And that's a tremendously generous thing for you to do, and I want you to know that I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. So do you all mind if we hear it for the Abbasi family? So I was asked to reflect on how Muslims are depicted in American politics, but I think We kind of already know that, don't we? Let me see if I can work this clicker, you guys. So I'm like at the home of where like the tech community, and we'll see how I do with that. Okay. So if you look at the headlines, you know, you can see it. You know, Ted Cruz, you know, we need to patrol and secure Muslim neighborhoods. He had in mind a neighborhood in Minneapolis, by the way. There's a neighborhood called Cedar Riverside where a large number of Somali Americans who were refugees from 22 years of war reside. I can tell you that these people start businesses every day. They educate their kids. One of them is on our city council, Abdi Warsami. Another one is on our school board, Saeed Omar. And two of them are contending for the state legislature, and they're battling fiercely. And it's a Somali versus Somali race. And most of the people who live in the district are not Somali. So this is a community making important contributions. Nonetheless, Ted Cruz wants to patrol them. Donald Trump, we all know, they are not coming to this country if we're president. Think about how many people of this nation immigrated from another land and made just tremendous contributions to our society. Albert Einstein comes to mind, but many have come here. I mean, this is a land of immigrants. You can't understand the United States without understanding immigration, and yet he wants to close it off for his own limited reasons. Steve King, even Muslims in Congress won't renounce Sharia law. He happened to be talking about me that day. The beat goes on. We know. And so we also see that while Muslims are being depicted a certain kind of way, it's not just nasty words. It's much, much worse than that, to tell you the truth. And at the same time, it's much, much better than that, too. I hear every day from Muslims who are practicing medicine, starting businesses, volunteering. They're telling me that their kids are getting into Stanford, and at the same time, they tell me that the mosque just got desecrated. Maybe in the same conversation. Good and bad, all happening at the same time. Important to bear in mind that this historic moment that we're in now is not new. There was a time in our nation's history when we saw legislation like the Chinese Exclusion Act. And it's also important to bear in mind the 1940s when the St. Louis, a ship coming from Europe with Jews fleeing the Holocaust, turned back in large measure because we didn't want them here. And many went to their death because of our lack of hospitality at that time. So this is not a new thing, but the question is what and can we learn from this moment of time that we're in? You know, the fact is that slide we have up here now, I'd like to, this slide right in front of you now, again, what is the public presentation? You'll look on the left, any war between the civilized man and the savage, support the civilized man, basically saying Muslims are savage, That's clearly what Pam Geller meant to imply. And then no more mosques at the top. And then one of the more scary things, this is outside of a Phoenix mosque, when the peaceful worshipers inside of the mosque doing nothing more than saying prayers, as these men are standing outside with placards that say F Islam. And as you can see, they're doing what they call exercising their Second Amendment rights. Now, you may have the right to stand outside a mosque and say nasty things, and you may have the right to bear arms in this country, but do you have the right to do both outside of a mosque and menace people? I don't believe that you do. I think this is an obstruction of the right to worship. I put this up here because I just want to be clear. The Muslim community definitely is feeling the pressure and the anxiety. Now, of course, these things have horrific consequences. Three more wonderful young people. It's hard to imagine them. Their loved ones live in this community, by the way. Maybe some of you know them. These three young people in North Carolina, Dale was a dentist, dental student. He not only would help people in Syria get medical care, Dia would help people in the inner city of Charlotte and in North Carolina. He was not just helping people who were Muslim, he was helping anybody who needed help with their teeth. And he was shot down. And the local officials who investigated the murder of Dia, Yusor, and Rezan, they said, well, this was a parking dispute. This was a parking dispute if Rosa Parks was caught up in a bus seating dispute. It's simply just absurd to reduce that. To this day, we wrote a letter urging the Justice Department to make sure this was investigated as a hate crime. The murderer, whose name I'm not going to say his name, he had all types of hateful rhetoric about religious people and had made threats and been menacing in the past, and yet local officials did not want to identify that as a hate crime. And so that, I think, gives us somewhat of a picture of the moment that we're in. We all can agree circumstances need to be much, much better than they are. I want to be clear that we've been in better places than this. After 9/11, for example, this was said, and I'll leave you to guess who said it. We respect your faith. It's practiced freely by millions of Americans and millions of more in countries that America counts as friends. Its teachings are good and peaceful, and those who commit evil in the name of Allah blaspheme the name of Allah. The terrorists are traitors to their own faith, trying in effect to hijack Islam itself. The enemy of America is not our many Muslim friends, and it's not our many Arab friends. Does anybody care to guess who said that? George Bush said that. Far cry from today's presidential field, right? Proving that it's not actually acts of terrorism committed by Muslims that is driving the anti-Muslim hate. In fact, since 2001, there have been over 254 acts of murder by right-wing extremists and about 54 by people who proclaim Islam. The rhetoric is not about the right-wing extremists, if you've noticed the news. I cannot present you headlines like the ones that I just showed you for right-wing extremists, but I can show you many more than the ones I've shown you as it relates to Muslim people. The anti-Muslim hate is the product of an orchestrated campaign to create it. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. Now, we know that the real question is not, is there anti-Muslim hate? We know that there is. The real question is, what are we going to do about it? And as we set forth on an agenda to act on it, it's important that we bear two very important things in mind. The private discrimination that we see going on, as depicted by the people who killed Yusor, Rezan, and Dia, the private discrimination that is captured by the spike in anti-Muslim hate crimes that we've seen recently, but also the official discrimination that goes on. And when I say official discrimination, I mean discrimination that goes on and is carried on by our government itself. What I'm speaking of now is the fact that if you look at the government's program, the federal government's and state government's efforts to address extremist violence, it is overwhelmingly focused on Muslims, not focused on the people who are actually generating the bulk of the violence. And programs that come out every day all seem exclusively aimed at Muslims and either directly or impliedly indicate that the Muslim community is a security threat. Now, what am I referring to? Well, the Countering Violent Extremism program, so-called CVE. This is a program which seems well-intended and good, where the government, FBI, or local officials will reach out to Muslim communities and say, let's sit down, let's build relationships. And in my view, if you go to a low-income refugee community and you say, we're going to perhaps build community centers and create job opportunities for you, all because we fear that you might drift toward terrorism, what you're basically doing is ignoring their real human need and only focusing on your fear of them. And therefore, we don't look at people as poor people who need a job. We don't look at people who need educational resources or recreational resources. We look at them in the security lens. And when you take a disproportionate amount of resources and you focus them into a small number of potential cases, if you do not have the cases, you might make the cases. And so we have seen a wide range of cases emerge where FBI agents and other law enforcement officials supply the means, the motive, the opportunity, everything, and they say, meet me here at this time and we're going to do this thing or that thing, and if the person happens to show up, they get to be charged with a very serious crime. Now, don't get me wrong. You won't find a fiercer opponent of people who commit acts of terror and violence than me. I definitely believe that these crimes are serious and need to be prosecuted severely. But I also believe that entrapment is not a valuable way to keep the public safe, and it's almost predictable that you'll get a lot of entrapment cases when you take a small proportion of the cases that Muslims might represent and you take the bulk of the money and put it there. At the end of the day, law enforcement officials are like the rest of us. They're paid because they produce. Produce what? Produce cases. Well, what if there's just not that many cases? Well, you find a way to get some cases. And you will understand that Amon Bundy, you know him, remember, Oregon? Amon Bundy, there's no CVE program in Amon Bundy's neighborhood. There might need to be one. There's no CVE program in the neighborhood Timothy McVeigh emerged from as he killed well over 100 Americans in Oklahoma in 1995. And yet that threat exists. Now, I'm not trying to protect anybody who proclaims Islam from the full weight of law enforcement if they commit wrongful acts, but just from the standpoint of public safety, don't we need to align the threat with the resources that we employ to stop the threat? And if we don't, what are the consequences? The innocent get afflicted, the guilty go free. That's what happens. So, this official discrimination is something I think we don't spend nearly enough time thinking about. Anti-Muslim profiling at airports goes beyond the TSA. This is official discrimination. New York drops unit that spied on Muslims. Those of you who are familiar with this particular case, you know that Muslim Advocates, which is located right here in your community, but reaches all out over the country, filed a lawsuit because they've unearthed systematic spying by local law enforcement, where they were literally spending taxpayers' money following Muslims around at a Muslim student association, following Muslims around at coffee shops, following Muslims around who went whitewater rafting. You know, I'd like to be on the force that day. I like whitewater rafting. And then deploying informants, the Muslim stings Muslims. So there's a case in Southern California about a man named Craig Montiel. You all familiar with Craig Montiel? Let me tell you about Craig Montiel. Craig Montiel was a regular crook, just a regular old criminal person. I'm not putting him down. He would tell you the same thing if he was here. If he could scam you, trick you, steal from you, he would do it because that's what he did. That's how he made a living. Well, the FBI said, you know, Craig, you're busted and you're caught for your wrongdoing, but if you want to work it off, we got a way. What you should do is take yourself down to the mosque, tell them that you're interested in Islam, hang around the mosque, don't start talking jihad right away. Wait for about a month or two, show up, start quiet, and then after a while, start getting to be friends. We're going to be paying you, so you'll be the guy with the car, you'll be the guy who has gas money, you'll be the guy who can be helpful. And then after you start gaining people's trust, we want you to start introducing this idea of jihad. The Muslims at this particular mosque welcomed him in, and then he started talking this jihad stuff, and when are we going to fight against, the infidels? And so they said, we're not fighting any. I mean, what do you mean? You mean writing op-eds or something? No, I'm talking about violence. He said, oh, we don't have nothing to do with that. We do not want anything to do with that. And they said, look, we'd like you to not come to this mosque anymore. He said, oh, well, maybe I'm just going to keep coming anyway. He goes to his FBI handler, and by pure, accident, leaders in the mosque call the Council on American Islamic Relations. They call the FBI, and they say, there is a guy in the mosque who is saying jihad and all this stuff. We just want you to know. Now, you know what happened, right? Of course, the FBI said, oh, that's our guy, sorry. Wrong. That is not what they said. Absolutely not. In fact, Craig Monteil said, what should I do? They busted me. They caught me. What do I do? They said, and they said, go back. They said, at that mosque, there's a lot of women who are widows and lonely and got kids. Why don't you try to see if you can get involved with them romantically and see if you can learn there. This is a fact. Craig Monteil, Monteilh. Read about it. And Craig Monteil eventually comes back to the mosque, and so the people at the mosque say, we've done a little bit of research on who you really are, because they gave him some Arabic name, but we figured out your real name, and they got an order for protection against him and said, 500 feet, man, you can't come here. So then he goes back to the FBI and says, well, what should I do? They got an order of protection in my real name. They said, I don't know. So Craig Monteil does what any, slick hustler does. He turns on the FBI and starts saying that they set me up. It's a setup program, and they paid me and all this. So what kind of confidence can you ever gain if law enforcement is saying we're doing outreach, but they're not really doing outreach, they're actually doing spying activity? And then more than that, you don't know when spying is going to ripen into something that's just sort of an entrapment case. So the official thing is something that I hope today we don't lose. There is individual, private discrimination, and then there is official discrimination. What are we doing about it? Well, we are writing to the Justice Department saying that, look, you must stop these practices, publicly criticizing the problematic nature of CVE. I'm not saying CVE is all bad. I'm saying the model needs to be adjusted. They're coming out with a new program called Shared Responsibility Committees. What is that? Shared Responsibility Committees. They go to local Islamic leaders who are respected, and if they find out that somebody is radicalizing, they will have this Shared Responsibility Committee try to divert the person back into productive uses and away from radicalization and extremism. In a way, it's attractive because a lot of these guys are teens. I'll never forget, there were 6 young Somali guys charged with giving assistance or substantive assistance to terrorism. They hadn't done. What they had done is they had bought tickets to go to Syria. Dangerous stuff, serious stuff to be concerned about. But they hadn't actually made any moves in that direction. One of them had actually gone to the airport, though, which is pretty concerning. He was pretty young, In fact, my daughter, who graduated from high school at the same time these guys did, she's 19. So it's stuff to be paying attention to. So the idea that you could have an intervention is not a bad idea. I think it's actually got a lot of benefit to it. But how are these committees supposed to actually function? In the ideal case, you'll see somebody who will be maybe diverted. But what about the non-ideal case? What if they go anyway? Are the people on the committee in any way liable? What if the person gets charged with a crime? There's just so many strange things that can happen with these sort of shared committees. And the other thing is that when you start sending money and resources to these committees, do you not create an environment where some parts of the committee think that this is the snitch committee? And is that a productive thing? We are fumbling as a nation with how to deal with the Muslim community and terrorism. And I think that the real answer is we've got to just start treating people just like we treat everybody else. If somebody is committing crime, we need to enforce that. But to create special little units where we enforce particularly against this community, I think is a very problematic situation. It only leads to difficulties and rarely leads to, it usually leads to difficulty and only leads to serious problems. I'm glad we're having this conversation today. I hope we generate some conversation about what do we do. But bear in mind, we are dealing with the smallest part of the equation when we talk about Muslims who are radicalizing toward extremism. Dylan Roof, for example, we don't have a shared responsibility committee in South Carolina. Maybe we should have one. We don't. We don't even think about that. In fact, one of the sad byproducts of this whole thing is that when young white men are in crisis and in trouble and are thinking about doing extremely violent things, because we would never dream of profiling white people, they're not even on the radar, and we're always caught by surprise. Let's move on. So what do we do about it? What can be done? On the issue of private discrimination, I really believe that leaders in community sending social messages is critically important. This is called It'd Be Un-Minnesota. Now you can't, I wish I could get a little red thing there. Yeah, there we go. Now you can't read this, but let me tell you what it says. We have on here leaders, the CEO of General Mills, the Pillsbury Doughboy and all that, we have the leaders of Medtronic, the pacemaker company. We have leaders of Target and Best Buy. We have leading voices in politics and economics in Minnesota on this ad, and I'll read it for you. It'd be un-Minnesotan. If you're reading this, you're probably a Minnesotan. This ran in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Uh-oh, I don't know what just happened. All right. Pop, that's what we call soda pop. That's what everybody should call it. So pop up north, snow days. Y'all never heard of snow days. It's when the snow comes down, and it's so much of it, you don't even have to go to school or work. Snow days mean something to you. So do the values we're raised with, everyday sleeve-worn courage, goodness, and kindness. Though we may be a soft-spoken bunch, we know better than to be silent or still in the face of bigotry shown to Muslims. Now remember, this is the business community, by and large. Our fellow Minnesotans, every intolerant social post, every prejudiced comment aimed at Muslims needs a response. Your response. We must lead people to a place of tolerance and understanding. We must come together as a diverse and vibrant community. Our values don't take days off, and neither should we. If you're Minnesotan, you know this to be true. We know better. We can't be tricked into betraying our values. It would be so very, very un-Minnesotan of us. Now you can just stick Californian in here, right? But my point of this ad was that we were going to get. So if you're just a clerk at Best Buy and you're just selling TVs, and you see this ad, we want you to know that if you are inclined to write something hateful on Facebook, that the CEO might not appreciate it. You understand? We want to create a social norm where some things are okay and other things are not. By the way, we had Republicans and Democrats up here. And it was sad that some of our sitting Republicans didn't get on, but a lot of Republicans who had served in office in the past were on. I don't know if you guys remember Senator Dave Durenberger, former Minnesota senator, and others as well. So we had a good mixture of people, and I think this is doing a lot of good, because at a number of companies, U.S. Bank, RBC Wealth Management, Royal Bank of Canada, which has a big branch, they all sent it to their offices and urged their staffs to review the ad and discuss the ad and talk about tolerance and inclusion. And we counted up all the people who may be represented by the leaders up on this. And after we got to be about 100,000, we knew that, it was well more than that. So this is something, a small thing. There were 3 separate articles written about it, and we got it trending on Twitter, and it got a lot of pushback. If you read the comment section of the Star Tribune, it got a little ugly on there. But what we really did is we exposed some of the nastier sort of ideas out there. And what we did is we relegated the nasty ideas to the margin. You're not going to get rid of the nasty ideas. The bigots aren't going anywhere. But what you can do is make them, you can marginalize them. We are in a tug of war. Trump and Cruz are trying to mainstream bigotry, and we are trying to marginalize it. And that is what's going on. Nobody's going to eliminate anybody else. The good, decent people are not going to eliminate the racist, nasty people. But you can make what they say unacceptable in mainstream conversation, which does a lot of good. It's the difference between somebody feeling that it would be fine for them to desecrate the mosque, pull some woman's hijab off her head, call somebody a name, shoot somebody. In New York City, when the whole Ground Zero Mosque issue was raging, there was a cab passenger who asked the driver, "Are you Muslim?" The man responded, "Yes," and then the guy started stabbing him. I mean, I can just go on these cases, case after case. A lot of the people who commit horrific acts are people who are highly suggestible and commit these acts when they feel that the social space has opened up for them to do it. So let me just also move on and say that the fact is that there are a lot of positive responses. Not only are people who are of other faiths, business leaders and others responding with things like this ad. Another one ran in Mankato, Minnesota. I believe that there was some that ran like that here in California. The Muslim community itself is engaging politically. Now, it's important to understand this about the Muslim community. About half of all American Muslims are foreign-born. And what does that matter? Well, here's what matters. If you were born and raised in Syria, for example, you may not have the most experience with civic engagement, right? Or add to Egypt, More recent, the truth about a lot of countries all over the world, Muslim, non-Muslim, is that there's not the degree of democracy that we experience is different from what they may have grown up with. If you're from Somalia, there was no state for 22 years. And so you have, and then what is the other half of the Muslim community? Well, a huge part of it is African-American Muslims, of which I am one. And I am the first generation of African-Americans. No, I'm not. Actually, my children are the first generation of African-Americans with all of their rights. When I was born in 1963, African-Americans had not yet seen the 1964 Civil Rights Act or the 1965 Voting Rights Act. In 1963, you could tell somebody, "We do not serve Negroes at this restaurant." In 1963, you could tell people, well, you can vote theoretically, but nobody's going to actually allow that to happen. We're going to deny you registration. We're going to deny you voting in the primary. We're going to deny you a ballot. We're going to make you take a test to see if you can interpret the Constitution. We're going to make you guess how many bubbles are in a bar of soap, actual test. And this is the history of our country. So The other half of the Muslim community, or substantially the other half, the African American community, is pretty new to democracy too. When you think about it, within our lifetime, many people in this room were living and breathing in 1965 when the Voting Rights Act was passed. And before that, you could not claim that African Americans lived in a democratic country. Certainly did not. So what you're looking at is a whole community that in many ways is just really beginning to get its feet under it from a democracy standpoint. I mean, even this institution, the Abbasi Institute of Islamic Studies, is somewhat of a new institution. I mean, institutions, Islamic studies as a field of academic inquiry is somewhat new on the American political and academic scene. Am I right about that, Professor? And so the thing is that, but that's part of the curtilage of democracy, though. That's how you get it. You have people thinking, writing, inquiring on these critical topics, which then other people like me hopefully will use that information, that knowledge, to try to extend opportunity and inclusion. So the academy ends up being a very important place because you may be surprised to know it, but most of the ideas that we introduced in Congress, members of Congress didn't think of. They come from places like Stanford or any university across the country. So, excuse me, I'm going to go back to that. I don't know what I did there. I'm trying to go back. How do I do that? Okay. Sorry, guys. Okay. Clearly, I don't know what I'm doing here. Okay, yeah. So we have Muslims running for office. I mentioned some, but there are others. There's a young lady in Michigan whose name is Rashida Tlaib. She did not win her Senate race. She served in the Minnesota State Legislature, and she's doing really well. You also should know, in the whole Flint crisis, there's a young woman, Dr. Mona Atish, who is the doctor who refused to listen to the EPA and the Michigan Pollution Control Agency, who said that the children were not experiencing elevated levels of lead. This woman is an Iraqi refugee who moved to the United States, but was so committed to the public health of these kids that she was just willing to she's willing to do battle with these other bureaucrats over the health of these kids. She's contributing to the democratic, foundation that is being built right at this very moment. Muslim groups are organizing registration drives to mobilize voters against Donald Trump. That's awesome. I don't know if that's a 3 or 5, but over 300 delegates to lobby Congress on Second National Muslim Advocacy Day. Second. See that? Second. And that's coming up in a few days. And you should know something that I consider to be a law of political science. This is a law of political science. It's just like you have laws of physics and, Isaac Newton and apples falling from trees and so forth. You have a law of political science. You could write this down. If you have an issue, no matter how silly and trifling and just unimportant it is, if you have a large body of people organized fighting for it, it's going to happen. You can have an issue that is absurd, bad, and stupid, but if a large body of people are fighting for this issue, you're going to get it. For example, the idea that you need a license to operate a motor vehicle, but in many places you don't need a license to own a firearm. There's a highly organized, well-paid group of people making sure that is the law. It's not good policy. 90% of Americans agree that it's not good policy, but it still is the law because a highly committed, well-financed people want it to be that way. On the other hand, no matter how important and essential and popular an idea is, if you have a diffused, unmotivated, underfinanced group fighting for it, then they're not going to get it, no matter how high, no matter how meritorious that issue may be. You know, the gun issue comes to mind, but I can name 25 others. But here's the thing. A small committed group can overcome a large disorganized group, but a large organized group can overcome a small organized group. So the real key is organization. So when I see Muslim lobby days, and they've asked me how they should construct this day, I said, well, by all means, understand that politics is a team endeavor. No, the core organizing principle can be, rights for Muslims in America, but don't forget other religious minorities. Don't forget the religious majority. Don't make sure you're operating in an inclusive way, because all of us love the idea that in America you can practice your faith any way you want to. Nobody has a problem with Muslim lobby day as long as you don't make it an exclusive thing. They had one in the state of Minnesota. I believe you have one in the state of California too. And they invite the governor, they invite both sides of the aisle, and it ends up being a good thing. I said, look, what's the difference between a Muslim lobby day and, I don't know, sugar beets day, right? The people who don't make sugar beets aren't mad at the people who are lobbying who do want sugar beets. It's just you pushing your issue, but be inclusive and help people make the connections. And then the other thing about Muslim political engagement to understand is that there are a lot of places in this country, including up here in Northern California, in Southern California, in Dearborn, Michigan, in Minneapolis, in Northern Virginia and Maryland, where the Muslim vote can be the critical difference between winning and losing. And yet, I can tell you the Muslim vote has not actually been organized yet. We don't talk about the Muslim community as a voting bloc. We talk about the Jewish voting bloc. We talk about women voting bloc. We talk about African Americans. Hillary Clinton is real glad about them African American voters nowadays in the South. That's just, what they did. I guess we're the firewall for her campaign. But so it's common to talk about voting blocs in terms of race, religion, gender. It's an American kind of thing to do. And yet the Muslim vote is still so embryonic that we really don't talk about the Muslim vote. In fact, that's one of the reasons why people who can rally public support to themselves by whipping up hate and hysteria against the Muslim community. But when you talk about a community that may have as much as 1.5% to 2% of the whole population of this country, clearly well over 2 million people, then some say as high as 6. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. But the point is, this is a substantial voting bloc. And then the other, when you add on the fact that so many Muslims in the United States have close friends and relatives of other faiths who are apt to be persuaded by things that they might say, what you end up with is a pretty substantial voting bloc. And until the Muslim community becomes that voting bloc, it is very difficult to ward off people like Trump and Cruz because they pay no price for that. You notice when Don Imus got up on the air a few years ago and started talking about nappy-headed hoes, remember that? He lost his job over that. It's not that good of as much racism as African Americans face, it's not that good of an idea to say overtly racist stuff on the radio anymore. You will pay a political cost to do that. There's not much of a political cost to insulting Muslims on the airwaves today. But I believe this is something that's going to come to a close because every single day people are organizing, they're pulling themselves together, they're figuring out how to engage, they're doing it on the local level, which is where it's so important. And I believe that the future is bright. And I think that just as we saw the Chinese Exclusion Act, and now we see that the Chinese American community is an important, substantial voting bloc. And just like we remember, they said, no dogs, no Jews, and no Negroes. Now, the Jewish community is a strong voting bloc and a political force. African American community, particularly in this election, is important. So as early as 2008, maybe even before, substantial. I mean, the Democratic Party couldn't really do anything without the African American vote. But just as these communities have had some success in the political arena, I believe that is in store for the Muslim community as long as people begin to continue to mobilize, organize, communicate. And oftentimes, I'll have people from the Muslim community say, Brother Keith, how can we, or Congressman Ellison, how can we, have a better voice? How can we counteract these negative imagery that we are faced with in the press? And I sometimes tell them about that little boy whose father used to tell him a bedtime story every night. And he told him a story about the lion and the hunter. And the dad would say, son, there was a big, giant, fierce lion who was so scary, he had teeth, he had claws, and yet the hunter, who was so small and who almost was close to losing, somehow would vanquish the big lion. And day after day, night after night, the father would tell the boy the story, but when the boy got to be, about the age when kids start asking questions, the boy said to his father, he said, Dad, you always tell me the same story. You vary the facts, but it always ends the same way. The little hunter, despite all odds, defeats the big, ferocious lion. And the father looked his son in the eye and he said to him, son, until lions learn how to write books, the hunter will always defeat the lion. Tell your own story, claim your own story, own your own story, and you might just win that story. Thanks a lot, everybody. So, time check wise, we got time for some discussion. Huh?
Half an hour, 30 minutes?
About 20 minutes?
30?
Okay, that's fine. Well, let's get started. Yes, sir. Does anybody have a pen? I need a pen for these three-part questions I get sometimes.
Congressman Ellison, first of all, I want to thank you for your service to our country and to the Muslim community. I have been in this country since 1952, and I've seen some of the prejudice that you talked about that existed in this country. I've also been a professor here for 34 years, but things are changing, and Muslims don't feel the same way as they did, say, 20, 30 years ago. And I think you have illustrated many of those things. Just want to have two brief questions. One is that I have not seen much said by NAACP about the hatred and prejudice that is being articulated by some of our political candidates. Okay. And I want to know, why is that so when there are so many Muslim members of that organization? Yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask you was this ad that you showed on Minnesotan. Why isn't an ad like un-Americans, like that, un-American?
That's a good question. Well, on the first front, all I will tell you is, quite candidly, that the NAACP is still functioning, doing some decent work, but their level of advocacy has waned. All organizations, need to go through. They need to, get the dead wood out sometimes, and I think they need to do that too, because I think that they should be far more vocal than they have been. I can also tell you that a few years ago they were threatened with a lawsuit because someone claimed that they were being partisan. That was when Julian Bond was the chair. I thought it was not a fair accusation, but it did happen. I'm not saying that chilled their speech, but the truth is, with all the issues that are going on around the country, you would think you'd hear more. But I can tell you this, Ben Jealous, who's the former president of NAACP, has been vocal on all these issues. But I think the current leader of the NAACP has more of a administrative style, perhaps. But they're there, they're working. I deal with them on a regular basis. I just think that it's fair to say that they need to step up their game on this. Now, on the other hand, the ad, it's a good ad. Tip O'Neill one time said all politics is local. This is true, right? And I would say that it would be, if you put an ad un-American, I think that that would work okay. I just think that if you're trying to target a message at a particular geographic area, it's better to make it more specific. So, for example, if that ad was about the Bay Area, people would feel it a little bit more personally, right? You ain't talking about Americans. You're not talking about Floridians and Rhode Islanders. No, you're talking about people. You're not even talking about people from San Diego. We're talking about folks in our neighborhood, right? And sometimes targeting your message will make the people who are the targets of the message feel a little bit more personal responsibility. And if you all consider doing an ad like this, and I would encourage you to at least discuss it, I think that you would find a lot of people would support it. My only recommendation would be aim high. Aim high. I mean, go for the governor, go for the Google guys, go for the biggest companies in town, and don't aim low. And then also, you're going to have a lot of Muslims who are going to say, well, I want to be on the ad, and say, if you're a CEO, you can be. But say, remember, we don't need to persuade you to not be an anti-Muslim hater, right? You're already won over to that idea. On our ad, there was only 2 Muslims on the ad, me and Omar Ishraq, who's the head of Medtronic. And I called ahead to some Muslim leaders to tell them, look, you're not going to be on the ad because you're already on our side. We already got you, right? We're trying to persuade other folks, and they got it, But then they did something interesting. They took our ad with our permission, and they put it on their own websites and said, you can be a citizen endorser of this ad. And they ended up getting like 150,000 people on that ad. And then the state of Minnesota, it was a national, they said anybody who wanted to from anywhere could sign. So, but I would, if it's something you're interested in or thinking about it, let me know. I tell you how that ad idea started. There's a guy named John Taft whose grandfather was President Taft, and he is a Republican. He's a pretty moderate Republican, but he's a Republican nonetheless. And he said, look, Keith, we should do this ad. Full-page ads are underutilized as a tool of persuasion. So we talked about it. We got some ad people involved to help write the script. And we sorted it around, and we went for it, and we got folks to get on. And our biggest problem is that we didn't have enough space to get everybody on who wanted to be on. And then someone said, well, you should get the faith community on. I said, the faith community is different. I think there should be a faith community ad. But, usually it's not as hard to get, Christians and Jews and Hindus and Buddhists and others around this issue of treating people right. The business community's goal is profitability of their company, to get them to take a moment to say, no, we're going to, the moral climate in our neighborhood and our community is important to us too, I thought was a sort of a slightly different statement. And so we kind of said, let the faith people do theirs, and we'll let the business and political people do theirs. And that's how we did it. Of course, you could do it any way you want to. And my recommendation is that you think about this or some other way. But we cannot just get the Muslim community involved in stopping anti-Muslim hate any more than we can just get women to stand against domestic violence. We got to get men in that fight too, any more than we can just get black people against anti-black racism. We got to get the whole community to say this is not acceptable. So those are some of my ideas. Thank you for your question. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to piggyback on the media question. Thank you. But first, I just wanted to thank you for pointing out to us how important it is for people who are respected in their communities to be speaking. Mm-hmm. Educational research, this was something, I'm a retired teacher, and in one of our in-services, we learned when we were, and the issue was racism at the time, back in the, is the 80s. The most powerful thing that could happen to change attitudes and how students were treating each other is how the leadership, from the student leadership to teachers in classrooms, and on up from there, how they responded and how they were modeling behavior. And I think that's why it's so incredibly troubling. This campaign is so terribly troubling to see people running for the highest elected office in our land to be behaving the way that they are. It's such a step backward, which brings me to the question about what are you seeing in terms of the mainstream press, in terms of coverage, just news coverage that's more balanced, let alone editorial, and what's happening in terms of people working in that area?
Well, let me tell you, as a politician, which I am, I know that the word is used often kind of derisively, but you are what you are in life, right? The press follows sensation. The press follows power. That's what the press follows. It doesn't follow morality. It doesn't follow what's right. It follows what is sensational or what powerful people are doing. So even if Obama's not doing much, because he's the president, they're going to report on him. I mean, he's doing a lot, but even if, let's just say he was taking a walk. I remember one time he was just taking a walk. He was literally just walking to get ice cream, and they followed him around. So they will follow power, and they will follow sensation. So Donald Trump says something crazy, all the cameras, right? And I don't think that that's really ever going to change. Why? Because people, unfortunately, like reading that kind of stuff. So in terms of the press, the thing to do is to get people who are perceived to be powerful, like you said, to take public stands on the key issues of our time. Now, if you do that, the message is going to be watered down from what somebody else might say, right? Somebody else might write a far more, when I had a lot of people say, this ad is kind of milquetoast, Keith. It's not tough enough. It's not condemning racism and discrimination. I said, yeah, man, but you can't feed the fish the bait you like. You got to feed the fish that the fish likes, right? And if these folks are going to be, they got companies to run. They need to try to maintain a certain degree of, they can't go too far in a particular direction. But the message that they're delivering through this ad to the people we're trying to talk to, this message works. And so you got to be a little scientific about it. And you got to also understand that emotion drives choice. So you got to do something to pluck a heartstring too. If you don't pluck that heartstring, it's just going to be like, yeah, whatever. And that's the way that you got to deal with the press, right? It's got to be sensational enough to get their attention, or you got to have somebody who they think is important enough to get their attention. And if you are working those two angles, you can get the press to do what you want them to do. But I tell new politicians and new people running for office all the time, the press doesn't necessarily hate you, and it doesn't necessarily like you. It just does what it does. I said, does a shark hate the seal? No, but it's still going to bite it. It's just the nature of the game we're in. So make it work for you, right? They report on what powerful people do. Get some powerful people to do what you want them to do, right? That's why George Clooney was able to have a fundraiser where people were dropping serious dollars down there. Am I right? Thank you for your question. I hope I answered your question. Yeah. In the blue and white check shirt. Just use your outside voice.
Assalamu alaikum, Congressman Ellison. It's such a pleasure to have you here, and I just wanted to thank you for all your work that you do in Congress. You're such a voice of compassion and justice there. I'm with the Muslims for Progressive Values here in San Francisco.
Ani Zonafelt and those guys?
That's right, Ani's group from LA.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to reiterate one point. I think Reza Aslan, I don't know if you know the professor. He's a great writer, writes about contemporary Muslim issues. So he actually raised this really good point that facts change minds, but relationships change hearts. And I think what you're doing is amazing, and starting from talking to the leadership in this country and try to change the hearts that way. But I think it's also a two-way street. Muslims also have to, ordinary Muslims have to seek out relationships with people in other faiths and other backgrounds, because I mean, and he brings up the great analogy of the gay, lesbian, transgender community within the last 10 to 20 years, where the mass, like, there was so much homophobia throughout, like, the 20th century, even until the beginning of this century. And then, just the public perception of gay, lesbian, transgender people has changed so much that now we have legalized same-sex marriage within a matter of like 10 to 20 years. And I think the Muslim community can follow that model, where they built relationships. People came out, you people in your own family, your neighbors, your coworkers, and you realize, oh, this person isn't scary. This person is just like me. They have the same hopes and concerns and desires and so forth. And I think if Muslims do that too, we make an active effort. I think that's going to go a long way into changing the perception, because the perception of a community informs the policy and ultimately the legislation, towards that community. And my second point is that I think it's great that there are these great Muslim organizations out there, but there's also a diversity within the Muslim community. Like our organization is very, very advocates gender equality fully within the family, within the communities of worship, and also very inclusive of the LGBT community, whereas a lot of more conservative Muslim organizations are not. So I just wanted to stress that there is a diversity within the Muslim community within the United States, just as there is within the Christian community, where you have your right-wing evangelicals, and you have your very liberal, like Christians, and the liberal Lutherans, the Unitarians, and so forth. So I just wanted to make that point as well.
Yeah, great points. I can't really improve on it, so thank you. Yeah. Right here in the middle. Is it Aisha?
Yeah.
Samira, sorry. My bad.
I just wanted to follow up on this talk and thank you. Obviously, we thoroughly enjoyed your talk and all you do. Exactly to the point of the diversity, I just wanted to say the divide and conquer issue is very real here. And I think that there should not be, the small efforts that the diverse Muslim communities make should not necessarily, should come together so that the numbers increase and you have the critical mass that you were talking about. And so everybody should say, keep your own identity, keep your own community, but come together, because we have far more things in common than we have minor differences. So come together and form a coalition, keep your identity, say what you have to say in your local community, but come together because we have to say something about this issue. And these are the things we all agree on. The violence, the terrorism, this is not Islam. And here are the reasons why it's not Islam, and we all agree with all that. So I think it's important to say that when efforts are made for the communities, the different communities to come together, to say that, look, you don't have to agree with every single thing everybody has to say about their interpretation. It's just that we all have to have a voice, because this is not going, every year it's getting worse. So that's all I had to say.
Well, Samira, thanks for making that point. All I want to add on to that is, as the Muslim community matures in the United States, diversity of view is a natural outgrowth of that, it's, one of the great things about the United States is that you really can worship as you see fit. If we were in Iran, it's not that easy to be a Sunni Muslim there. If you are in Saudi, it's not that easy to be a Shia Muslim there. If you're in Pakistan, not that easy to be an Ahmadiyya Muslim there. So even in the Muslim world, the United States actually is a freer place of worship. In the United States, you could wear anything you want. You can cover, you can not cover. You can cover a little bit. You can cover, it's up to you. And you could even wear niqab. I think it's legal to do. But in other countries, like, no, you can't wear it, or you must wear it. Like, I think in Tunisia, and I think even under Turkey, you couldn't cover. And then in other countries, you must cover. So in the United States, it's your thing. So, we got to make good use of this environment that we have. And I'll also say this, and this is your point, inspired me to say this: we need more scholarship on Islamic stuff in the American context. So, like Muslim voting, who's writing about that? Gender equity, who's writing about that? national security. We need papers on this stuff. We need papers on Islamic history in the United States. It goes way back. It goes way back. And we could probably generate ideas all day long. Muslim in the healthcare industry, huge contributions. In the high tech community. But we need a body of inquiry. When I first ran, I went to a friend of mine who was an imam in town in Minneapolis, and he said, Brother Keith, voting is haram, and for those of you who are not Muslim, it means forbidden. It's equivalent to eating a ham sandwich and drinking a beer and buying lottery tickets. Can't do it. Bad, all the way around. And I said, well, why is that, brother? He said, well, I'm from Iraq, and the U.S. war in Iraq was awful. They bombed my home. A lot of horrible things happened. I said, well, I was against the Iraq war in the beginning. I'm against it now, and one of the reasons I'm running is to criticize it and try to get us out of there. And he goes, well, then maybe it's okay then. You see what I'm saying? So this is clear that he has not really thought through. And is there sort of, what does the Quran and Hadith and the Sirah and the Sunnah teach us about Muslim obligation? This means I gotta go. Obligations to service, right? What does the text say about just living in a community and not trying to help it be a better community? Can you do that? I mean, of course you can do that, but can you do it as a person who's trying to follow the requirements of the faith? What about apostasy? How does that work? You know what I mean? Somebody needs to write about it. There are a lot of topics where this institution can do a lot of good. And I just hope that we think about that. There's fertile ground for research and inquiry. And let me just tell you, and I said it once, I'll say it one more time. People who are actual policy makers, we usually are just parroting what some academics said, right? I mean, it doesn't flatter me to tell you that. I'd like to say that I come up with all of these ideas. But the truth is that usually that some researcher has been grinding numbers or studying something, and then we hear about it, then we go out there and move it. So it is enormously important that we have the Abbasi Center here at Stanford. It is enormously important. And so I hope we make maximum use of it, because there's a lot of opportunity here. And there is a very strong nexus between the idea generation and the policy. So 3 minutes left. Last question. Does that mean I got, okay, so I don't know how to do this. Now, I think this side of the room has been a little deprived. Wouldn't y'all agree? Okay, we got a student right there.
Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm a sophomore here studying history, and thank you so much for coming to speak to us today. Thank you. I was reminded of this issue when I saw one of your slides up there about the civilized man and the savage man. In war, we must support the civilized man, and the punchline of that ad was support Israel. And that's a dynamic I've observed here on campus in various Israel-Palestine advocacy spaces, in which Muslim American students are disproportionately accused of being anti-Semitic, anti-American, etc., for being critical of Israel. So I'm curious, in the spaces you work in and in the community at large, how we might change the way we talk about Israel so that it doesn't foment Islamophobia.
Now, I could be wrong here, but I think there was a guy named Nathan Sharansky who came up with a test for whether criticism of Israel is actually anti-Jewish. And he said, if you're singling Israel out for things that other people do, that might be a problem. That would, or if you only ever criticize Israel, or if you equate Israel with Nazism. I think that was his test. If you guys know better, then correct me. You and I both know that there are people that if you said that the timing of the traffic lights in Tel Aviv is off a little bit, they'd say you're anti-Semitic, right? I'm like, come on, man. Israel is a in many ways a great country. They generate more patents. They actually, you know, they have a legal system where, you know, you can get a trial, you can get a legal ruling. There's a lot of good things about Israel. I've been there. One time I went to Israel, heard the call to prayer, went to downtown Tel Aviv and went to Jumu'ah prayer. You can't do, if you're a Christian, you can't do that in Saudi Arabia, right? But on the other hand, as Israel says, I'm a first world nation. I'm not like, you know, other countries in the Middle East. Well, then you got to up your game and be like the countries you compare yourself to. And that means you can't have separate roads for some people and other roads for other people. You can't do it. You can't take all their water. You cannot literally subsidize your citizens to take over land from another country through an act of war and aggression. You can't do it. The UN says you can't do it, you can't do it. So my opinion is you should not, if Israel's the only country you can figure out that has human rights abuses, then maybe you are being unfair to them. But if you say, look, I've criticized the Burmese for what they do to the Rohingya, I've criticized the Hondurans for what they did to Berta Cáceres, and I'm criticizing Israel for what they're doing for these double roads and these other things, then those people who make that accusation, I think they're just trying to push you off of legitimate criticism. And by the way, you should know that, you know, look, Israel is the ally of the United States. The Palestinians are allies of the United States. The United States is the largest single contributor to UNRWA, which is the group that helps sustain Gaza and the West Bank, Palestine. They're both of our allies. We should help both of them resolve this conflict, which, by the way, is not thousands of years old. It's not. This is a conflict that is solvable. It is essentially a land dispute. And you think, you know, okay, so you got all these people, settlers moving into Israel, into Palestine. Look, if there are Muslim, Arab residents and citizens of Israel, there can be Jewish residents of Palestine. They'll just be Palestinians by nationality. You understand what I mean? You want to stay? Fine. Well, you're going to have to get a Palestinian passport, right? And I think some might move then. You know what I mean? So those are some of my ideas on it. Don't single out Israel because they're not the only country with human rights abuses. Even our own country does. But I'm going to tell you this. I'm not going to sit up here and call for the closure of Guantanamo and not criticize a dual standard of justice in Israel either. I'm just not doing it. And I don't really care if somebody doesn't want to vote for me because of that, because I don't need this job. You know what I mean? I'm not joking about that. I tell every politician, never fall in love with that job. The second that job is the most important thing to you, then you will literally do anything to keep that job, which means you might violate every principle that you said you ever had before you got it. So don't love that job, love the truth, love service, and then you might actually be decent at the job. Thanks a lot, everybody.